Welcome back, everybody, to all the attendees. Okay, we are now going on to our next presentation. Allow me to welcome the speaker for our next session, which is Dr. Matthew Lamont, the Managing Director of DownUnder GeoSolutions Asia, also known as DUG. Then you'll see on this backdrop there, DUG on this orange backdrop. So the floor is yours, Dr. Lamont. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all today. So without further ado, I'll see if my PowerPoint comes up. I can't see my PowerPoint. Let me just... Yeah, so it's a pleasure to be here with you today and to share Doug's journey in Malaysia, because it is quite a long journey, and Malaysia has been a significant part of the growth of our company. First of all, to give you a bit of background on what Doug does, what we are basically is mathematicians and physicists that work in the traditionally in the oil industry, now beyond the oil industry, and we work with very large computers. So we build large computers. We have a very large computer in Malaysia, and we write all the software, the numerical software to process seismic data traditionally, and now we're going on and we're working in other arenas as well, as we'll look at. But yeah, think of us as the guys running big numerical algorithms, dealing with big data sets and running on very large machines. We run our service business in the oil and gas industry out of Malaysia. And in this business, we service 200 clients across 48 countries. So this is our history. So I started Doug back in 2003. And you can see very early on, we found opportunity in Malaysia. And we had people in Malaysia. Our first employee was actually in Malaysia and working in the Murphy Oil office back in 2004. And then we added a couple more, and ultimately we opened an office. But we'll have a look at these early days in the next slide. And but you can see the progression of Doug. So Malaysia was our first overseas office from Perth. We then went to Houston and opened an office in Houston, and then London. We did all the Pilatus work, and ultimately we IPO'd the company last year on the ASX in Australia. We now offer, you can see when we brought out Doug McLeod, which is a terrific offering, and that's when we started to go beyond the oil and gas industry, where we're doing high performance computing and numerical software for many industries, and we'll look at that. So that's the world according to Doug. Orange countries is where we've done projects. Probably one of the more bizarre places, we set up a data center in Sakhalin, so the island on the east of Russia there, for ExxonMobil a long time ago now. So that was perhaps one of the more bizarre places we've worked, but we've worked basically everywhere. We've sent Malaysian people everywhere in the world to yeah, every place. It's been a terrific journey, and from Iran to Saudi Arabia to everywhere you could imagine, we've been. The black dotted line is our global fiber, and that's how we transfer data and people, if you like, or have people remotely working on projects, is through our global fiber network. So our Malaysian people now support all of the offices, and it's a real hub for us, Malaysia, and they do that via our fiber connection. And you can see the machines. The biggest machine for us is Bubba in Houston. He's over 20 petaflops now, but Bodhi is 3 petaflops, which is a very large machine sitting in Malaysia, and Bruce sitting in Perth is about a 5 petaflop machine. Sorry, my clicker is just reconnecting. Oh. For a tech company, I'm a little slow. So just a bit of a history. We had staff in KL in 2004, so very early on, first country out of Australia that we went. In the early days, we had no office, and then about 2005, 2006, we had an office in Menara Dion, which we shared with, where we piggybacked on another company. And then in 2007, we started our first office. So we started in Menara Dion, and then we went out to KL Central for a few years, and now we've come back into where we are today, the G Tower, which has been a great building for us. We started working for Petronas doing full seismic services in October 2007, and we support all our global software from Malaysia. We got MSA status in 2016, and there you go. January 2018, we moved to our new offices. So I was a bit early there, and yeah, we moved our COO who runs our service business. We appointed Gunnar to run the service business as our COO in a couple of years ago now. So there's a large cluster. There's a really big machine there. It is using our latest technology, and we service all sorts of clients out of there, both oil industry and non-oil industry these days. Oh, there we go. We've got our COO, Gunnar's down there. Fariz and I have travelled the world. Fariz went to London for a few years for us, and now he's back in KL running the geoscience initiative there. Murshid is part of our IT team, global team. So our IT team works very globally. They're in each office and they handshake at the end of each day. So we use our global spread to give us 24-hour coverage the way we support. So Murshid supports all of the offices along with his buddies in the IT team in Malaysia, and we have a big business development team. I keep dropping out of my connection, sorry, from my clicker here. There we go. So why did we invest in Malaysia? Well, initially, we just found opportunity. The reason we started up in Malaysia initially was just opportunity. We found great opportunity there, and we really found Malaysia to be a great place to work. It was very simple for us to start working in Malaysia. The people are very welcoming, very warm, bureaucracy quite straightforward. And the other thing we really appreciated it versus some other countries was the lack of corruption. You know, we've never had any issues with corruption in Malaysia. It's been a really great journey for us, and much appreciated from myself and Troy. Troy and I started Doug. But the time zone's great, of course, for Australia. We've got our connectivity now. We have had, if we were to be critical at all of Malaysia, traditionally we have had connectivity issues. We could never get the bandwidth we wanted, but that's resolved these days. And it's a great hub for servicing Asia, and we've used it very heavily for servicing Asia out of Malaysia directly. We work from, Myanmar, India, Myanmar, Thailand, all the way through to Vietnam, Philippines, and up to Japan and Korea. We work all out of our Malaysian hub office. It's been very stable for us. We've never had any issues, as I said, up there. And yeah, it's been great. And the education system in Malaysia is first rate. So it takes a bit of effort, but you can hire really good people there. These days, we actually manufacture a lot of our computer room equipment in Malaysia, and again, that's gone very well for us. So I like one of the downsides of COVID for me personally. Look, sounds trivial, but I do miss visiting Malaysia and Malaysians. Great food, people walking around KL at night is so safe, and it is a wonderful. It's a wonderful city. It's a wonderful place. I have to figure out how to stop my clicker clicking off. So we've got 100% locals. We don't have expats in Malaysia. We've got it's a hub for Doug. So we've got from data scientists, research, R&D, software people, software documenters, IT specialists, HR people, project admin for the weld is done from there. We've got a whole raft of back-end services as along with all the front-end services are all run out of our office. It's taken us a while to build the workforce. I think we're about 120 people there now, and it's 106. I should stop making things up and read the slides, shouldn't I? 106 people there now. We have full training for our graduates. Yeah, look, as you can see, it's been great for us. And let me try to move on again. Is that going to work? Did I move on too then? It took us a long time to get recognition for Petronas, but I'm not totally against that. That's I understand it now. At the time, it was frustrating, but I understand it now. It's about guaranteeing quality and being careful. It took us a while to understand exactly how to go about hiring the right people and getting value out of those people. We certainly got it sorted now. Oil and gas industry is volatile, so that's always been the case for us. And Malaysia is a little less volatile, if anything. Petronas tend to keep spending through the downtimes. Of course, the pandemic has been very difficult, and we've all suffered along with Malaysia. Malaysia has done it as hard as anybody, and that's affected our office a great deal, and still affects our office today. And it's very sad for our folks there. We focused on oil and gas, although we are doing some work in the non-oil and gas now, and we want to really expand into the non-oil and gas in Malaysia. That's been a big impetus in Australia is getting into the non-oil and gas, and that's gone real well. If you think of it from our perspective, we're really good at maths and physics and numerical codes on big computers. And what we needed to do was step outside the oil and gas industry and see if there was a role for us there. And so the first place we did that was in Australia, and we certainly discovered a lot of industries, and we'll talk about them soon, where we're now working, and it's going really well. So now it's time to spread that to the world, and we're actively working on that in Malaysia. And you'll see that we're very green, and we're going to talk about that for quite a bit. So Bodhi, I touched on that, is our computer in G-Tower, and that's it sitting there. So you can see it's very unusual. All our machines are immersed in an oil. That oil is biodegradable in the environment, it's non-flammable, and it's food grade. So it's absolutely inert, it's absolutely perfect. It can do nothing to anybody, even if it leaks or you drink it or it's a beautiful substance. And so what we're offering people now is to come in and use our HPC, and we'll help people run, and that's what a lot of it is about. I think there's some folks there going to play a movie. So it's slightly out of date, but I think it's a good movie to show you what we're doing.
Doug is a global geosciences company serving the oil and gas industries. We are always at the cutting edge of technology, striving for improvement and efficiency to deliver the best for our clients. All Doug's processing algorithms are coded to run on the latest Intel Xeon Phi processors. It makes the previously impossible possible. For example, FWI. Anyone can achieve this sort of resolution. Some companies can do this. We can do 60 Hertz. Our commitment to high performance is serious. In 4 seismic processing centers around the globe, we are running enough CPU horsepower to be equivalent to a top 10 supercomputer. We work with Intel to take the latest generation CPUs and put them in here. A very special fluid. It's a high thermal capacity liquid with some amazing properties. Most importantly, it is non-conductive. Not good as a cocktail mixer, but our computers love it. Our server tanks are specially designed so the fluid never leaves the tank as it circulates to cool the equipment. Our unique heat exchanger is in the tank, making the system compact, simple, and flexible. it can use any cooling water source. For example, evaporative systems, chilled water, seawater heat rejection. Most HPC data centers are expensive, loud, and environmental disasters. Combined, worldwide they use as much power as the UK and generate the same greenhouse gases as air travel. Usually, 1/3 of that power is devoted to cooling the air. The DownUnder system has many advantages. We remove all fans and use efficient evaporative cooling, giving us proven savings. A constant temperature means processors run more efficiently. It's so quiet, it can go anywhere. No dust means no filtering equipment. And the safety margin in the event of a cooling system failure is 10 times an air-cooled system. We can have a greater compute density than can be physically achieved in air. The same number of racks can fit into much less space, and the system can be scaled to any size. We can go big and go green. The common calculation for efficiency is power usage effectiveness. The average data center is about 1.8. The most green co-location center is just over 1.2. And specialized single-vendor centers can be as good as this. We are running at 1.045 in 2 of the hottest cities in the world. The DownUnder system is setting new standards. It is modular, using inexpensive standard components, and it can be customized for any space and output requirements. Find out how much the DownUnder HPC cooling system can save you at downUnder.com. DownUnder. Our smarts are making sure orange is the new green.
Thank you. So that is a little bit dated, that video, but I think it gives you a really good rundown on our cooling system. So that cooling system and all that computer room equipment is manufactured in Malaysia. You can see Bodhi sitting in the background there has probably got 30 tanks there. Bruce sitting in Perth, 44 tanks. But all of the tanks for Houston, there's 722 tanks, and they were made in Houston. So we're very much about green and being part of the future in terms of being green. And that's what hopefully we'll go on and have a look at now. Next slide, please. That's a lot better than waiting for my phone to reconnect. One of the things that differentiates us is our knowledge about how to run numerical codes on big machines, and the fact that we have physicists and mathematicians, and we write our own codes, and we write our own domain-specific languages, and we write our own compilers and so forth. Because if you think about it from a point of view of a molecular chemist or a radio astronomer or any scientist sitting out there, or anybody trying to do statistics, they'll know their field. The molecular chemist is an expert molecular chemist. He knows what he wants to do, but he might not have the skill set. He probably doesn't have the skill set to write the code to run it and to achieve what he wants. And that's because, you know, computers are not simple anymore. If you have a look at machines with GPUs, or even just without GPUs, you now need to thread your codes out to, 128, 256 threads. If you're running on GPU machines, you need to offload data and code fragments and onload data and code fragments, and then thread it out to those very large thread counts. Manage all your data, and if you think of the whole cluster, get these huge data sets onto and offer this big cluster and so on and so forth. It's not for the faint-hearted, and that's the service we provide. So we can work with scientists and we can enable them, and we can take care of the IT side of it, including both supporting them with their codes as well as providing the high-performance computing. So we turbocharge their science, we enable their science, and that's the core differentiator for what we're doing. The high-performance computing is very good, it's very reliable, it's very robust, and it's very cost-effective. But then you've got this layer of craft and knowledge that we then bring to the party as well. Next slide, please. So I'm not sure how, sometimes when we talk about high performance computing, HPC, people are very familiar with it and then others are not. The thing about high performance computing, think about scientific computing, think about machine learning, think about, any of those sorts of things, AI, those sorts of things all run on traditional high performance computing. And today, all contemporary research runs needs high performance computing in it, whether it's designing a COVID vaccine, or modelling fires, fire and smoke modelling, or modelling fires like it happened on the eastern seaboard of Australia. Everything you can think of needs high performance computing these days. And the second quote is just talking about, the big radio astronomy project that we've got going on in Western Australia. Next slide, please. So if you look at the high performance computing market, at the moment, it's about $151 billion US per annum. But it's growing rapidly, and it's going to be $1 trillion business by the end of the decade. And it's across many areas. And that's what we are working hard to get a share of that. And that's what we want to bring to Malaysia. So whether you're a radio astronomer, they use enormous amounts of high performance computing, or you're in resources like oil and gas, meteorology, every time you look at the news and you see a weather forecast, that weather forecast comes from a simulation run on a high performance computing. A lot of military and space stuff now is absolutely reliant on high performance computing. And of course, education and research is obvious. And then there's industry, all sorts of industries, also any robotics, any automated cars, anything you could think of requires high performance computing. And then health, all your genome work, surprisingly, all your genome work uses a lot of high performance computing. So the growth of high performance computing is exponential, and we want to have a share of it, and we want to have a share of it and running Asia out of our Malaysian, out of our KL office. Next slide, please. This goes to just, the radio astronomers published a paper in Nature where they talked about their carbon footprint. And this goes to what was talked about in that video. The high performance computers in the US use more power than the UK does in total. High performance computing uses an enormous amount of power. It's a real issue for high performance computing. Thank you. Next slide. So at Doug, we've said that carbon neutral is not good enough. We need to reverse the damage that humans, people have done to the planet. And so therefore we must be striving to be climate positive. That's the only future. We're all very aware of this, and that's right, going back to that astronomy quote again. A sustainable economy must reconcile both environmental and economic agendas, right? So we all know this, right? But most businesses are sort of running on their economic agendas and their making money agendas, whereas we actually think that being green is a massive opportunity for us all. It's not just an impediment. It's not just going to cost us money. If you view it the right way and you work at it, it can actually be a massive business opportunity. And in the coming years, it's going to become a bigger and bigger business opportunity. Thank you. Next slide, please. So we've talked about the HPC is traditionally a big user. Since that video, we have tuned up our systems. We now save 51% of the power bill. So we already, of course, the greenest power is the power you don't use. And so 51%, we're already saving half the power. So we're already very green. And that means, 85% less synthetic refrigerants and power use effectiveness. But that's half the story. We're saving half the power, but how do we get the other half of the power? And what we're moving to is all renewables generated power. And then we're doing fundamental hydrogen research as well for the battery, for a battery style hydrogen solution, or it might end up being a flow battery. But what we're doing is fundamental electrolyzer research. Next slide, please. So to summarize again, we save power. We've saved 51% of the power bill, so that's the greenest power. The second part is power from renewables. Geraldton is where we're building the first big green data center. Well, they're all green, but the first one running on renewables. And that power now is very economic. It's about 2 cents, Aussie cents, which is about 6 ringgit a kilowatt hour. So it's very economical power. And then we need to have some sort of fuel cells or flow battery. So we're working on a hydrogen solution for that. In Geraldton, the wind and the solar are quite out of phase. So we've only got 25% of the time when you need some sort of solution, when the wind isn't blowing and the sun ain't shining. And this green, pure green, climate positive, no emissions during operating times, is the future. And for the first thing we'd like to do is to export these high performance computing cycles through Asia, through the Malaysian hub. Next slide, please. So I'm sort of running ahead of myself with my dialogue, but you can see that's our hydrogen solution that we're looking at. It's all about the capital cost. So we've got a bit of a different take on it, and we've now got a prototype electrolyzer running. And we're just moving, our board just signed off on moving to a production prototype electrolyzer. So we'll be starting work on that very shortly. It's very exciting times, and hydrogen is a big part of the future. And there's still some challenges there, but we've just applied for 3 patents for our new electrolyzer. So we're very excited by this work. Next slide, please. Sometimes people say, where did this high performance computing business come from? You know, how come it's suddenly just popping up out of the ether? And the answer is that high performance computing traditionally was the mandate of governments. Governments provided high performance computing in most areas in the world. But now that government provided HPC has been slowly commercialized. And that's the wave of commercialization that we're riding. The oil industry always provided its own high performance computing, and the oil industry has always been at the forefront of high performance computing. Indeed, it's pushed that boundary constantly throughout its history. But outside the oil industry, the high performance computing was always the mandate of the governments. Next slide, please. So just an idea of some of the success we're running and what we're running out of Malaysia. So Equinor is a $60 billion oil company out of Norway, and they're extensive users of our compute and of our software. And they come in on our McCloud platform to access our software and our high performance computing. It's fantastic, great service, and it's a really new way for doing business for us going forwards. And what this one is especially important for is we displaced a very large competitor's software, and we displaced Azure. So so now their high performance computing is running on our hardware using our software. So it's both hardware and software. It's a beautiful contract. Next slide, please. So the first is one that was in the oil industry, which is part of our bailiwick. The second one is around genome research. So it's the Harry Perkins Institute. They've now signed on, and they do their high performance computing on our systems here in Perth. Next slide, please. The third one is the radio astronomers. So, and this goes to that craft that I was talking about, right? It's a science unto itself now. It's a specialty science to write these high performance codes. They're not something that a scientist can just turn around and do themselves anymore. So we had when we were looking to get to work beyond the oil industry, we saw a couple of elephants. One of them was the radio astronomers, and the second was meteorology. We knocked on their door. We said, come and run on our machines. We'll give you a hand with the code. We brought one of their codes and a bit of data across. We watched the code run. It didn't run very well. So we turned around and we spent a couple of weeks working on their software for them. We made it go 125 times faster. And then we ultimately ran the entire backlog of their data on 3 hours on the machine. The thing is that on an equally sized machine, they'd spent 2 years trying to run this backlog of data and only got 15% through the data. And that's what this craft brings to the party. This deep craft that we've built up in Malaysia and in Perth, that's what it brings to the party. Is it enables science, it turbocharges science. Thank you. Next slide. So that's it. I'm nearly finished. That's our social media. I would really encourage everyone to look at our blog. It's a very active blog. We put articles there about what we're doing and what we see happening in the world. And I love it. I look at it every day. And next slide, please. Oh, next slide. There's no, yeah, there you go. That's one I was thinking of, and that's one of our new ads. Green computers, our superpower. So we could perhaps leave that up while I address any questions that there might be.
All right, thank you, Dr. Lamont. Excellent question, excellent presentation there. We've got a few questions, very quick ones, maybe yes or no. First one, can DUG be applied in Bitcoin mining machines?
Yes, we can. We do crypto mining on spare cycles on our machines, and we do have some specialist Bitcoin miners working away in our data centers in America.
Okay, so next one, I see that the hubs are using the naming. All of them start with the letter B. Why is that?
Well, we were just. Do you want the real story? We were a little bit frustrated because as a smaller company, nobody would pick up our press releases, and so we couldn't get any airplay. And so our marketing lady said, you know what we should do? We need to name our computers. So we sat around and we named our computers, and suddenly it got a lot more fun, and press started picking up our press releases, and it's been great, right? It's been a fun journey.
Oh, okay, that's cool. Okay, I was wondering why Buzz, Bobby, Bodhi. Okay, Bodhi, I know it's a tree. So interesting story behind that. Okay, I heard, I think the audience heard that you define Houston and Perth as the hottest areas. In your explanation, hottest means the environmental heat outside or the power generated within the data center itself?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? That's probably a bit of poetic license in that video. Malaysia is probably not quite as hot, but much more consistently warm. Yeah, it's Malaysia would be up there in terms. I think they're just talking about outside temperature.
Outside temperature. So when you're making a selection of the location, does the environmental temperature or the environmental climate be factored in? For example, like extreme cold or extreme hot?
No, not for us, because the cooling solution saves 51% of the power bill anyway. There's no advantage to us being in super cool places. You know, a lot of data centers are being put in the Arctic and other frozen wastelands, but we don't need to do that because of our cooling solution. So the decision on where machines go these days, why are we putting a machine in Geraldton? You know, Geraldton's not in Perth, Geraldton's not in KL, Geraldton's not in Houston. It's because of the quality of the renewable resource there. It's the solar and the wind, and it's also, if you just Google Geraldton, what will come up is a picture of a tree growing sideways, and the trees grow sideways in Geraldton because the wind blows so much. The global, kite surfing and wind surfing championships every year are held in Geraldton because the wind blows so consistently. And on top of that, the solar and the wind are a little bit out of phase. So you only have 6 hours on average a day when you don't have wind or sun. So that's why Geraldton, it is really chasing the renewable power. And we can put in solar power for about, well, as I said, about 6 cents, 6 ringgit a kilowatt hour, which is super cheap. And so we can have our cake and eat it too. And that's the business of what we're saying. We can take this green high performance computing to the world, right, and to Asia, and we can lead the way by being green. Perhaps the next centre when we look at that can be in Malaysia. We'll see how our business grows in Malaysia.
Yeah. Malaysia is sunny almost all year round, so we use up energy there. You mentioned that the manufacturing of the centres is done locally, but how much percentage of local products is used? For example, for the Malaysia, are there any imported components?
Not as far as I'm aware, no. We certainly don't import anything. The manufacturer in Malaysia, so we use a Malaysian company to manufacture the tanks, the heat exchangers, the PDUs, and none of that equipment comes in. It's not assembly. It is genuine manufacture.
Okay. So it's genuine manufacture locally on site, near within the country. Right.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Here's a question. HTU electrolyzers to H2 and hydrogen. Instead of using as fuel cells, Japanese technologies is making hydrogen drinkable water. Is the electrolytic process the same? Not sure whether you can answer that.
Yeah, I mean, it is. What comes out of the fuel cell. So your electrolyzer goes from power to hydrogen, and your fuel cell goes from hydrogen to power. And what goes into the electrolyzer is water, and what comes out of the fuel cell is water. And the water is pure. Of course, in our case, we recycle that water. So we have a, think of it as a tank of water, and the water goes into the fuel cell and into the electrolyzer, and then it comes back out of the fuel cell, and we pump it back over into the electrolyzer again.
Okay. And how about the fuel? Do you use that or for other purposes?
Only hydrogen. So do we use the hydrogen? We don't use the hydrogen for anything else but for making power. But we are looking at other opportunities. If we get our electrolyzer working, so think very low capital cost electrolyzer, then it's going to have massive opportunities everywhere in the world. And so we'll be looking to manufacture these in Malaysia as well.
So currently, I think you mentioned around 30 tanks in Malaysia. Looking for expansion of maybe how much more how much percentage more within the next, say, 2 to 5 years?
Well, so what our modus operandi is around compute is to put it in just in time. So how much compute goes into KL depends on the demand for compute in KL. And same for everywhere else in the world. We don't put in, we put in the computer rooms ahead of time because they're the long lead time items. And so I think we can double the amount of compute in the computer room we already have in Malaysia. I think we've got 3 computer rooms in Malaysia. I think we can double the compute we've got in those computer rooms in Malaysia at the moment. And then we'll just build more computer room space after that. But the computers actually go in according to demand. So as our business grows in Malaysia, we'll put in more compute.
Okay, on business continuity planning, for example, if one of the hubs are down, so will the load be shared by all, or would there be a specific hub that will be handling the hub that is having an issue?
No. If a hub goes down, then we shift the work to another compute room. So an example of, it's a good question, an example of that would be Imperial College. So Imperial College, we're running on our machines in Houston, and then that big freeze in Houston happened earlier in the year. And overnight, we took all the students and staff off the machine in Houston and transferred them to Bodie in KL. So they finished all their work and their research in Bodie in KL. So we can shift people around the world. And that's, we got lucky with the continuity planning. We were fortunate in that we wanted to move to a cloud vendor for high performance computing and software and so forth. And so we wrote the platform. We wrote the McLeod platform. And then COVID hit, but we had the platform. So all of our people could then just go home and work from home because there was a platform to enable them to very effectively work remotely. So we've been very fortunate. We haven't missed a beat with COVID, but it's very sad. It's sad for the people and so forth, and people have suffered. But in terms of our business, it's been pretty continuous. Yeah, so our timing was good around our new cloud platform.
Excellent, because I think that's one of the most important things in terms of stability of any system. Looking back, if anything happens, what's going to be, is the business still be going on, especially in oil and gas, something that's huge data.
Absolutely.
Exactly. Maybe just maybe a final wrap up, or what are you looking at into the non-oil and gas industry? Just a wrap up of what you expect very soon, right? Post-COVID.
So, well, we would like to start identifying industries that we can help. We can help with their codes. We can help with providing high performance computing, and we can get after them. And that's going to take time. So what we've just embarked on now is building these structured sales teams, because they are different sales teams than the traditional sales teams we have. So we need people with knowledge bases, people with networks, and we need to get out there and find these things. And it is a feel good, although it is hunting for new clients in a real traditional sales sense, it is also very rewarding, because we're offering such a good service and people need that service, that when you find people, they are really appreciative. So I'm really excited to take what we did, a proof of concept, if you like, over the last 12, 18 months in Australia, and now to get really after it in other markets in the world.
That's great to see. Of course, you already have your footprint in oil and gas, which is one of the strictest regulatory bodies. Oil and gas, banking, all those are very strict in terms of their regulations. Okay, thank you, Dr. Lamont. Thank you for your sharing.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, all right, great to hear
Thank you,
from
Hazrul.
Thank
you, everybody who's listening.
All right, everybody. Okay,
Bye-bye.
We'll now be moving on to our next session of the day. We'll be beginning very shortly. So attendees, do click join session, and we'll be back at 11 a.m. Okay, see you soon.